What that means is you are taking advice from somebody trained in forestry, timber, not for deer habitat. Now, what I mean by that is this looks great right here, but it's terrible. Why would you do a tree planting that is going to cause you future work? That doesn't make any sense. We've got enough to do on absentee landowner properties, just huge deer hunting properties. We don't need future work. Let's do the work the right way the first time and make sure that it works. They do not have a separate textbook for deer habitat. You got to make sure your planting rate is for deer, not for timber. Hey guys, Jake Blow here, the Habitat Pro. Today we're going to talk evergreen plantings for deer habitat. We're going to cover screening, we're going to cover bedding, we're going to cover how to do combinations of both, the topography that's going to help you do both, and for those of you that are considering purchasing trees from state agencies or getting into program to get cost share for doing those plantings at their instructions, I'm going to tell you why that might not necessarily be a good plan for you by showing you examples from properties today. That is what we do on the channel, is we take you to our client properties, show you real life examples of how to do things, how not to do things, how you can change things immediately to improve areas. If that is of any help to you, please like and subscribe. Without further ado, let's get to it. All right, so right here we have our Roundup Ready alfalfa burn break underneath a cover crop of oats. Right here is the outer layer of evergreens. This is white spruce. There's a few Black Hills spruce in there. What we notice here is they have planted these roughly 6 feet apart. You can see this two stems there. Those are actually, I would say those are closer to 5, maybe even 4. Now here's what's crazy. This is one of the common misconceptions about evergreens is you look at the planting space in a row, and what it'll tell you is, oh, this tree, a white spruce, is eventually going to get 15 feet radius, so a 30 foot across. So plant one tree every 30 feet. However, on an outside row that gets full sun all day, you can almost plant them as close as you want. It doesn't matter what species it is. Now, I typically go with Black Hills spruce, eastern red cedar, balsam fir, because those are more compact growers, or they are trees that don't mind touching neighbors, and they really won't ever lose their needles. However, white spruce, you can see here, is doing just fine as well, and everything is intertwined, and we have a good screen. Now I'm going to compare that to the screen that is given with Norway pine, white pine, any pine. Okay, so this is Norway pine, planted at roughly the same rate in the row. There's a couple that have died out, but for the most part, that's what we've got, the 6 to 8 foot, whatever the tree planter was using at the time. And we're only 30 feet away from the spruce that I just showed you. And it looks like this is a great screen. Now, the problem with the advice that I usually hear for this type of a planting is, oh, I'm going to put pine on the outside because that'll grow faster and it'll get up and be a good screen for me in just a few years, whereas the spruce take longer. The problem is they're going to grow, right? And after they're mature, this is what we get down low. And that's what we get deer to look through. And this is only a few short years away from dropping all of these branches down low, the whole 4 feet, all the way through here, right? And then we're going to be screwed because people are going to be able to see through your screen for several feet into your property until they get to spruce. So look what happens back in here. Now we have the spruce again, which is a great screening tree. But you can see in here, it's full sun today. These are starting to touch, and you can tell some of the branches are starting to lose needles down low. So what's going to happen is all those pine are going to keep getting taller, shade out the spruce that you think is going to be your next screen, And then you're going to lose more needles down low on the spruce that you're thinking are going to be the screening effect, but they're not going to be, because these rows are only 10 feet apart, and anything that gets shaded from another row is going to eventually lose needles down low. It's just what happens. All right, now this is the second issue that I see often on client properties, and almost every one of these was planted by a government agency program or just by a government agency, meaning DNR, NRCS, SWCD. Somebody came in and did the tree planting. They got cost share for it. And those organizations have foresters that have written their specification sheet, and they have to follow the specifications of the forester that wrote the specs. What that means is you are taking advice from somebody trained in forestry, likely over 3 decades ago, because all the textbooks are old. Okay, they might be re-editioned and, updated here and there, but for the most part, the advice is for forestry, timber, not for deer habitat. Now, what I mean by that is this looks great right here, but it's terrible, because what we have is we have trees every 5 feet in a row, and we have 10 feet between rows, which means this is about to close up. We've got about 5 years left here, and this is going to close up entirely, shaded out from the neighboring rows and shaded out from the neighboring trees in the row. And we're going to start losing needles like crazy down low, and it's going to look like this. When you ask a forester to come in, they are trained according to forestry practices, and forestry grows timber. That is what they are trained to do. That is the planting rate that strips off all these bottom branches before the logger gets here, so that he's not ticked off and doesn't have a whole bunch of branches to deal with. I mean, he's still got branches, but these will be taken off by his processor, no problem. Whereas the ones that are out on the boundary, they are getting full sun. They are going to be tough to deal with because the branches are 2 inches around, as big as your bicep, and frozen solid, and 15 feet long. So you got to make sure your planting rate is for deer, not for timber. All right, so as you see here, they've got every 5 or 6 feet in the row according to specifications, and then they've only got 10 feet between rows. So we are about to touch here and get shaded out from the neighboring row and get shaded out down low. And this is what you get with any of the textbook government programs, because they're telling you to plant trees at 800 to 1,000 per acre. And all they can do is listen to their textbooks. Well, their textbooks are written for tree plantings for timber. They do not have a separate textbook for deer habitat. So what we're going to get here is with the spruce, you guys have seen the videos before where I had to come in and manage this. All those branches are going to tie together so deer can't move through it. So they totally ignore the area. Okay? The pines lose their stuff down low, and that's why they plant them for timber so close together, because they become very easy to process. They grow very straight and tall, and they shade out everything underneath. But that is for timber. That's for the timber guy. The timber harvester guy loves that. Deer, we can only do this in small islands, and then they'll love to lay down underneath it. But of course, this is getting back to our boundary planting of pine. Do we want deer to be able to lay down right here and watch your access from 15 feet inside of cover? I would say no. We don't want them to be able to see that. We would want on the outside row a layer of spruce. And then outside of that, we should have switchgrass, tall, warm season native grasses, something on the outside that gives us another layer of screening so that we can get past what we need to get past, while the inside can be deer habitat, bedding, food, but we can't get by that stuff if the outer row is pine. On the other hand, if we wanted to plant for bedding, this is a great result. So what if this was inverted? Meaning, what if what we're looking at right now, spruce, what if that was on the outside and we had a farther gap than this row right here? So we did not allow this row to be so close to that one. So let's say 20 feet at least away from that row. I'd say more like 30, and then put switchgrass between the rows. Okay? Then we come inside of it and start doing pine. Okay, and then you can plant your pine where you want your bedding areas to be real close together in the row, close together between rows. This is again about a 6 by 10 spacing, 6 feet in the row, 10 feet between rows. Then we've got something, right? Then we've got screening on the outside, several layers, right? What we talked about right here was spruce on the outside, move over 30 feet, another spruce with switchgrass between the rows. Okay, you see what I'm doing there? I'm taking care of the lower screening right away with switchgrass, and then I'm taking care of the long-term screening that can take some winter with the evergreens. So in this situation right here, if this were my planting, I would have only planted that row. I would have skipped this one, planted switch between the rows. That's a 20-foot width right there from camera right to camera left. And this row I would have planted as well. Now I would not have done that 5 or 6 foot spacing. I probably would have stuck to 10 or so, because you can see what's happening here already. Already this is being shaded out from the other side. Those branches or needles are dying out. This is not a fungus of any kind. This is just what they do. If you shade them out from the sides and they can't get full sun, they start trimming themselves off on the inside. That stuff that's not getting sun trims itself off, and eventually all of these branches will be dead, and it'll again look like this. You got to make sure your planting rate is for deer, not for timber. All right, now let's talk about where to do this. Now, typically what we get with government agencies or just tree planting contractors, those you hire to come in with a tree planter and just rip them into the ground, they're all done in a day and they plant thousands. They don't take requests. Okay. What they do is they have a bundle of bare root trees, 10 per pack typically, or they have a bundle of the plug trees, 10 per bundle, again, typically, and they just unwrap them and they grab what they grab. And what goes in the planter goes in the planter, wherever the planter happens to be at that time. For deer habitat, we're more focused. Okay, what I just said was pines are great for bedding. Spruce and balsam fir are great for cover, for screening, for layered screening between bedding areas. So we don't want them to come out random. We want to put them where we want the bedding or where we want the screening on purpose. So you guys have been on this channel a lot. You know what I talk about all the time is topography. If you've got any elevation at all, they will value it, they will want it, and they will gravitate towards it every time if you put quality cover on it. So let's look at this spot as an example. All right, this is deer and machine access out to our main fields. Mulch that in. Some of you guys are going, what happened to those trees? I'm going to talk about that in just a second. All right, this is up on a knoll. So this rise right there over to that tree line and over there and down there and that way. This is a knoll about, I'm going to say 6 or 8 feet higher than the surrounding area. So up here is where I would plant pines. This close together, every 5-6 feet, all on this knoll, all pine. White pine, Norway pine, don't care what you do. The white pine, you're gonna have to bud cap, so I don't recommend those very often because they're deer food. But then when I roll down the hill, now as I get to the bottom of the hill, that's where I'm gonna start planting about 30, 35, 40 yards away. That's where I'm gonna go with balsam and spruce because that screens in the area. And I can also do native grasses in there. I can also surround that with a little donut of food. That's what I'm gonna do for screening, okay? Now, when I have my screening planted down the hill, uphill here, you can see what's gonna happen. They're gonna have the ability, let's say the wind is coming from my back right now, they're gonna have the ability to sit up here on top of the knoll, smell everything that's behind them, and look downhill through sparse pines, just like we saw previously, about 35 or 40 yards, and they're gonna love it. They're gonna be here all the time. This is where you're gonna find your sheds. This is where you wanna do it. Go to your elevation, get the sunlight in there, plant some pines on your elevation for bedding. I always suggest that if you are going to do a combination planting. If I'm only gonna pick one, I'm going spruce, I'm going balsam fir. But then you're gonna have a little more space in between because in a bedding area, they can't have the branches all interlocking together. All right, now let's talk screening. So look at this one now. We've got our spruce on the outside. And there's a couple rows here. I would not have done a couple rows this close together. I would have done probably the outside row. This would have been a 10-foot swath of switchgrass. And then this would have been another row of spruce or balsam, either way. Balsam is a little slower growing, but does a better job when it's shaded of keeping its needles, okay? And then you could keep alternating that with your screening depending on how much space you have. So this property is 140-ish acres. We could have gone, so you can see right there, we go spruce, switch, spruce, switch, spruce, switch, and now we're in the property, inside the property, like 30-ish yards. So now we can start thinking, okay, do I go habitat now? Do I increase the diversity? Do I start planting pines? Do I want them here? Because what'll happen is just inside of this boundary this far, bucks will feel pretty comfortable paralleling the boundary. So now we've got them on a pattern, okay? Now, how do we fix it, okay? Or how do we maintain quality habitat or fix and produce quality habitat if all we have is what the government agencies gave us, and now it's getting too shaded in here, nothing is going to grow, we've got no browse whatsoever? Well, to fix a place, sometimes that's what we got to do, and that is going to be a video for another day. I'm going to show you how we did that, where we did it on purpose, and what process we did so that we got our hunter the view that he wanted, as well as providing some habitat. All right, so themes from today. Number one, on the outside rows for screening, anywhere you need to wall off visibility, look for spruce, balsam fir, eastern red cedar. Those are your go-tos on the outside rows. Don't get caught in the trap of planting pine on the outside that you eventually have to deal with in order to encourage the spruce that you have coming behind it. Just plant it once where it should be at the rate you want and provide it with full sun, and you can get away with almost anything in a single row as long as it gets full sun all the time. If you think I should show you areas where we have single rows doing very well even when planted tightly together, give me a note down in the comments and I can spend some time putting that together for you guys. Definitely there. The second concept from today, if you're planting bedding, stick with your pines. However, stick with pines they're not going to eat if you want them to have that overhead thermal cover eventually, because white pine, you're going to have to commit to bud capping. In most areas of the country now, we have a high deer density. You're not going to get white pine past deer browse. It's always going to be short. So if you want to have what we were looking at previously, where it's shaded out underneath, it's dropping those needles, it's a real comfortable place to lay down, they've got their visibility, the wind moves through it, so they've got what they want there for security. Pines that are native to your world would be excellent for deer bedding, because they are going to naturally lose their branches down low, and your timber guys are going to love them eventually if they get huge. Third concept would be, when planting for screening, add screening between the rows. You can use shrubs, you could use switchgrass, but plant at a rate that's light enough, again, where it doesn't shade out the ground. With switchgrass, I never go over 5 pounds an acre. It doesn't matter what I'm doing, if I'm planting bedding or if I'm planting screening. Just make sure there's enough room between plants for snow to fall in so it doesn't lodge, and you'll be good to go. Sticking in that 3, 4, 5 pounds per acre range, especially if you're drilling it. Third concept that we talked about was watching out for your planting rate, because the planting rate is what's going to shade out and ruin your plans, okay? Again, the government regulations, the specifications in their planting programs say that they're going to plant 600, 800, 1,000 trees an acre. And their reasoning for it is, well, some of them are going to die. I don't typically plan work that I'm going to do based on hope or assumptions or any kind of non-constant, right? I want to plant things that are going to grow, quality trees that are going to grow, and I'm going to plant them at the correct rate so that I don't have to come back and do work again. Because what they'll tell you is, and if you get a good year, which obviously this client of mine got a very good year, the year that he planted his 12,000 trees, he got a very good growing season. They almost all took, except for on the dry knolls, and now he's got problems. We've got maintenance issues that we're going to spend thousands of dollars fixing. And if that's the reasoning from the forestry professionals, you know, oh, if they all come, you just thin them out later. Well, with what? I'm going to spend hours in a skid steer mowing them all down, every other tree, every other row. What? I don't want to do that. Oh yeah, we'll just let them grow then and have a timber harvest guy come in and he'll thin them out. Well, what they don't tell you is, when these trees are only 30 feet tall and they're starting to shade out the neighbors in the other rows, nobody wants these trees. Nobody wants them. They're not coming in for 2 sticks worth of Norway pine that's only 4 or 6 inches around. They're just not coming. You're not going to find anybody, so you're going to be stuck mulching. So if you're in that situation where you're doing a tree planting, why would you do a tree planting that is going to cause you future work? That doesn't make any sense. We've got enough to do on absentee landowner properties, just huge deer hunting properties. We don't need future work. Let's do the work the right way the first time and make sure that it works. Now that brings me to the last point here, guys. Planting quality trees. I only plant containerized trees. I do not trust bare root trees. They're too finicky on growing conditions after planting. They're too finicky on the planter's skill off the bat. Planting too deep, not enough soil around the roots, they're dead, okay? Then they're also finicky on the next 2 growing seasons. So even if they can't beat out the grass, they die again anyway in years 2 or 3. So that's why I don't do bare root trees anymore. I'm to the point in my career where I need to do work that is going to work. And containerized trees, since I found them, the way to go. I mean, way over 95% survival rate with 0 babying. We do not baby our trees. We plant them correctly the first time and then let them buck. We've got 2-year-old trees, 3-year-old trees, 5-year-old trees, all wonderful. If you'd like information on that, you can definitely hit me up with the contact information at the end of the video. On email is best. I have information ready to go there. If you are in some parts of Wisconsin, Minnesota, and you can pick up, or you are near enough to my nurseries where I get the trees to pick them up there, you can definitely get in on that order, but you got to contact me so that we can see what you need for numbers, for species, and then we can go from there. We really appreciate your time today, guys. This is a video got a little long, but we are passionate about getting tree plantings right the first time so it doesn't cause you work later. This is Jake Bull, the Habitat Pro. We are in northern Minnesota today. Get out and enjoy creation, guys. Good luck this season, and God bless.